Good afternoon. Today in our lesson we are going to be focusing our attention on reviewing the Village Tavern Polka, after which we will introduce our new material. So in regards to the Village Tavern Polka, something that has come up throughout the last few days here at the studio is students reflecting on the ending of this song and why it appeared to them to seem how a few described it as being unfinished. And this was something that was forewarned about in the original lesson regarding this song and how it just seems to end rather abruptly. And the question that came up more than once was, well, why? What about this song? Is there a musical reason or justification as to why my ear is wanting more? And there is. And so I'd like to spend a little bit of our time before going over the new material to talk about the construction of this song and why the way that it's written leaves many students this feeling of unfinished business, if you will. And that's going to lead very well into our next lesson, which again talks about song construction. Not necessarily to give you the tools to write a song yourself, although this would be one of the steps that you would use. You need to know how a song is constructed if you'd like to do it yourself. But also to show you how there is justification as to why you get a certain feeling when you're playing a song, or in this case, a certain feeling about how the song maybe should finish and how this one seems to finish, as I've said, a bit abruptly. Now, the way that I'd like to start this explanation off may seem a little bit odd, in that I'm not going to talk about the end, I'm going to talk about the beginning. Many students tend to err on the side of using introductions. If you're playing on an instrument that's got a beat, that beat can be introduced to you via an introduction. And the introduction is music played on your behalf. Most importantly, it's music played on your behalf at the speed in which you intend to begin. So if you have your instrument set at a certain beat per minute range, it's going to stay there. That introduction is going to be at that speed. So it gives you a bit of a preview as to how fast you're going to need to go. And if you're going to play an introduction, you need to make sure that you are starting the right way. And that includes, or intends, it is essentially talking about the chords, the left-hand chord. You playing the introduction and starting it by playing a chord. Now, what does that have to do with the end of the song? Well, if you've been part of our program for any amount of time, you are probably well aware of the fact that there are different ways to look at a song in terms of introducing an introduction. One long-held belief that I have fostered within my students that take lessons here is you want to look at the last chord of the song in most instances, because the last chord is usually the chord which represents the key that the song is in. And sometimes the first chord and the last chord are different, but the last chord is the one that kind of pulls you in, because that's the key, quote unquote, of the song. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, and an exception to that rule would be if a song transposed, or to use the musical word modulated, in the middle, changed key in the middle, you likely wouldn't use the last chord because the last chord would be after that key change. So that would probably sound a little funny. You would be likely to use a chord prior to that key change, and usually that would be the first chord. Okay? So we've always basically said first chord, last chord lead you to use the correct chord to start an introduction up. Because if you play a different chord, it's possible that you get a completely different style sound for the same beat. One that I often use is the style on the Lowrys that first is introduced on the Lowry Easy 4. And that is the traditional pianist style. Lowry long looked for a classical style that they could incorporate within their big bands and their foxtrots and their waltzes and things like that. And this classical style was finally developed during the Easy series. And if we put that classical style on, and I play a particular chord, I'm going to play a C chord here, I want you to take a listen to this introduction. And you could play something, for example, like Ode to Joy afterwards. So there's the body of your style. Once the song is over, if I hit the ending, very nice beat. Let's say that I set that up the same way, but I played a different chord instead. Take a listen to this. Now that sounds much different. Listen to the ending. Now that's the same background, but what a difference in the way that it sounds. And so this is why it's such an integral thing to use the correct chord to start your introduction, because otherwise the song could sound completely different. Okay? So, Village Tavern Polka. I'm going to tie all of this in just a moment. If I were to use an introduction, what chord would I play? Well, I wouldn't play the last chord, which is an F, and I wouldn't play the first chord, which is a G, because this song is in neither F nor is it in G. This song, Village Tavern Polka, is in the key of C. Now, how do I know that? Well, I can see here that I have no sharps or flats that need to be played. There aren't any. That's very noticeable in the right hand, but let's take a look at the left hand. I have F chords, C chords, and G chords, all of which are all white keys. Now, you may be playing on an instrument that's saving you from using all of your fingers, but still, if you did, the C chord is 3 white keys, the F chord is 3 white keys, the G chord is 3 white keys. There's the option of you playing a G7. Guess what a G7 is? An additional white key added to the G. So it's all white keys in both hands. There's your telltale sign that this song is in the key of C. Which means, if I were to use an introduction, I'd have to use a C in order for it to sound correct. Okay? Now I would immediately change to the G one note in, because that's my first actual chord, but my introduction would need to be played in C because the song's in C. Now, what in the world does this have to do with the end? Why did I spend all of this time to talk about the beginning when we're talking about how the end finishes so unfinished? And the answer is, the reason that it feels unfinished is because it doesn't end in the key that you expect it to. You may not even be able to verbalize your reasoning behind this feeling of quote-unquote unfinishedness, but that's what it is. Your ear is being led down a path to hear a C as what we in music would call a resolution tone. And it ain't there. It ends with an F and an F chord. Your ear is saying, I need some more here. Where's the rest? There is no rest. Now, why are songs written this way? This is something that is not incredibly uncommon with polkas. It's not uncommon with polkas. I look at it from my perspective as a musician in that it is very often the case, if you're going to play a polka, a lot of your polka's buddies are going to come along with them. You may play 3 or 4 of them, okay? And you may play them as a medley. A medley means basically linking one to the next. By leaving a polka wanting more, it's much easier to attach another one to the end of it. If it ends and everything is great, well, that's the end, and then you're just playing another song. But if you can leave your listener on a little bit of a cliffhanger, you can jump right into another song, and in this case, probably another polka, and it's going to sound great. Now, all polkas are not all like this, okay? But it does bear mentioning that that's a very common thing. And it's something that is done in a lot of musicals. If you're familiar with a musical, there may be a part of that musical, or oftentimes maybe they'll call it a reprise, where they'll bring a song back that they sang earlier, and sometimes they'll do them in medley form. Well, what they'll do is they won't sing the whole thing, they'll sing a piece of the thing, which allows them to transition into a piece of another thing, and then a piece of, and they may string together 4 or 5 different songs in another part of the show. Okay, or maybe at the beginning or the end, they'll play some music for you that is reminiscent of the music you heard, or maybe a prelude of the music you're going to hear. Well, they take pieces of it. Well, this is almost already broken up in quote-unquote pieces. Okay? So, what happens if I don't like the way this finishes? Well, it's not tough luck on my end, because I can make it finish in a more complete manner. And I would make it finish in a more complete manner by ending in a different place, which would complete the thought, which would satisfy my ear's desire to hear a C at the end. Okay? Now you may say, well, the measure before that ends with a C. Could I stop there? And you could, but it's still going to have a little bit of an abrupt feel to it. My suggestion is to go to the most stable C part of the song, which is at the top of the second page. Now I'm referencing here, I should have made mention of this, the copy where you just have notes and chords. The bass tones, we're going to go over those in just a moment. This seems to be the copy that most students have glommed onto, so this is the one that I'm covering in detail. I probably should have started right off with that. Okay, so if we're looking at this one, the top of the second page, right in the middle of that first line, I see a C chord and I see a bunch of C notes. That's where I would stop. I wouldn't stop at the end. I'd get to the end. And then I go back to the beginning. And guess what? The song's already written for you to have the ability or opportunity to do that. Because if you look at the last measure of the song, there's only 3 beats in it. Well, this isn't a polka waltz. It's a polka. Where's my 4th beat? My 4th beat's at the beginning. That's that pickup note. That becomes beat 4. And then I jump right back into the song. And if I play through to that second measure at the beginning of page 2 on that first line, I would stop there. And here's a little extra secret. I would not play all 4 of those C's. I'd play 3 of them. I'd play 3 of them to better match the actual ending of the song, which was 3 F's with an F chord. Well, this is 3 C's with a C chord. So if you get to that section at the end of the song and your desire is, I haven't been fulfilled, I need this to end the right way. Okay? And this is very common with music. We have these expectations that things are going to happen and we're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, it's like if you were to sing the jingle, give me a break, break me off a piece of that, and then you stop. Somebody on the other side of the room is going to yell out Kit Kat bar, right? Because they're waiting for that. They want to hear it. You can't just leave them there. Okay? So that is a way. Now, having said all of that, do you have to do that? No. You don't have to do that. I didn't do it. If you watched the video last week, I didn't do that. But again, there were more than just a handful of you that had this desire for that. And since you did, well, I wanted to go over a way that you could satisfy that itch. Okay, scratch that itch. Now, we also this week, this rendition, spoke about something called a Celerando. A Celerando was an increase in the tempo of the song during the performance. Last week, we went over reasons why that happens. Sometimes for performance-based reasons in that the composer is trying to elicit a certain feeling from you. I think I probably used the theme to Jaws last week and how it speeds up and speeds up and speeds up and your heart starts to race after a while. From the perspective of a performing musician, maybe it's a polka and they want to only have the best dancers out on the floor by the end. So what do? You keep increasing the tempo, your dancers start to peel off here and there, and the only ones that are left are the ones that know what they're doing. Neither of those are helpful to us. For us, changing the tempo is helpful because it instills within you, hopefully, a method of practice that you can go ahead and introduce into all of your playing if you're not doing it already, which I hope you are, which is you start every week at a certain speed, hopefully slower than I did, than I played it. And you start to climb up closer to the speed maybe that if you want to make my speed your goal, that I played it at as you become more comfortable with it. And if you can surpass it, go right ahead. This is just putting it in black and white. You should be doing this all the time, starting slowly and gradually increasing. This is just literally saying, we want you to physically do that this week. We want to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that you're doing this because it is an incredibly beneficial thing to do. Okay? So at the end of that first, third line on the first page, we see a Celerando, and it says +10. Now you notice it says +10. It does not say where you were to start. It just says, basically, wherever you did start, go up 10. So you go ahead and do that. You go up 10. If you started at 100, you go to 110. If you start at 80, you go to 90. If you start at 70, you go to 80. If you start at 95, you go to 105. Whatever the case may be. The middle of the first line on page 2, you go up another 10. The end of the third line on page 2, you go up your final 10, and that's where you stay for the rest of the song. Now, there are some of you that have the ability to increase your tempo relatively easily, at least in comparison to having to do it manually, because you can set it up to basically be automated, or you can do it manually. Now, let's talk about the manual way first. The manual way would be the most taxing way because you're in the middle of the song and you have to increase your speed by hand. How do we increase the speed? Well, we want to use the left hand to do it. Tempo is always on the left side. Our Yamaha Clavinovas is on the left, our Lauers is on the left. And the idea is that you use your left hand to do it. Okay? And the goal of using your left hand to do it is that the left hand, all in all, particularly playing this style of music, does less than the right hand does. It just does less work. So you got more time in the left hand to do it. Now you can bump it up 10 times, or you can hold the button and just kind of watch the screen, because if you hold it too long, it's going to go a lot further than 10, and it's going to go a lot faster as well. You're going to have to keep an eye on it. So I did have someone this week that said, I have a hard time looking at the screen when I'm increasing the tempo. And I said to them, I hope this works, but I said, hit it 10 times, just count in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's going up 10. Okay? Now, if you're going to do this in the middle of the song, on the first page, they give you a 1-beat rest that you can use to increase your speed. Is that enough time? Not if you're doing it manually. If you're doing it in an automated way, which I'll show you how to do in just a moment, well, that's another thing. But if you're doing it manually, 1 beat is not going to be enough. My suggestion for those of you that are doing it in a manual way is to not wait until it says Celerando. For example, on that first page, right after the first only chord on the third line, I would immediately reach up and start to increase my tempo right after that chord. Why? Well, I'm going to use my left hand anyways. Okay? And my left hand has no more responsibility for the rest of that line. And the way that many of your instruments are designed is you play a chord, you lift your finger up, what happens? It keeps playing. It doesn't stop. It keeps going. Okay? So, if you use your left hand to increase the tempo right after you play the C chord, the likelihood of you having gotten 10 up by the time that you got to the rest is much higher, obviously, than if you waited until the rest started. Now, the one at the beginning of page 2 is not quite that simple because the two chords are pretty close to one another between the C chord and the F chord. But still, as soon as I play that C chord, I'm bumping up. Okay? Now, one great thing about the changes on the second page is that you're playing the same note consecutively in your right hand, so it's not like you got to go looking for another note. You just play the same one. Now, how about the change on line 3 of the second page, that final and highest speed? Well, I play an F chord, and then right after that F chord, my left hand has no responsibility other than tempo until the last line. So I got plenty of time to increase my tempo there. But again, I would start to do it during the tied note. As soon as I play that F chord, my left hand is up and I'm hitting that tempo. Okay? Now, let's say that we are going to do it in more of an automated fashion. I'm going to reset the camera. So for those of you that have a feature called Memorize, or on the Yamaha is actually called Memory, which is there's a different button on the Lowrys. So just let me just set that square first. Memory on the Lowrys is different than Memory on the Yamaha. It's just two completely different brands. They use different words. But Memory there and Memorize on the Lowry do exactly the same thing. What they will allow you to do, as long as you know how to do it, which is why we're going to reset the camera so that you can see it, they allow you to hit one button to, in our case this week, increase your tempo not only by 10, but by as many as you'd like. So when we come back, we're going to be reset in front of the Yamaha Clavinova. I'm going to show you how to do it there. Then we're going to come back. I'll show you on a Lowry how we're going to do it as well. So for those of you that have that feature, you can hopefully have a better understanding as to, one, the benefit of it, and two, probably more importantly, how to utilize that benefit. Okay, so here we are at the Clavinova, and I've angled the camera such that you can see the right-hand side of the instrument as well as the screen, because this is the most important section here if you're going to be doing some of this memorizing. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to find a polka that we like. So I'm going to go into the Latin and the World button over on the left-hand side. I have March and Polka here, and I have 2 pages worth of marches and polkas. And it really doesn't make a difference which one you choose. Why don't we just go with the Orchestral Polka to start? So I've gone ahead and chosen that. Here is my beat. Nice polka. And I bring my tempo down to 105. Okay? Now, I want to increase my tempo by 10. So what I do is I hit this button that says Memory, and it's asking me all of these things. Press the desired button to which the panel settings are to be registered, which are right here, Registration Memory, from one of the registration memory buttons, 1 through 8. Okay? Now that's what we're going to work with here, and it gives me the opportunity to save all of these different things. Now, I'm going to keep them all checked marked, so it is going to remember the voice, which is the right hand, most importantly, the tempo for me, which is how fast the beat is going, the style, transpose, a bunch of different things. So I'm going to go ahead and hit one of those numbers. And now it's set. You can see there's a red light here on this button. That means that's set at 105. I'm going to go up 10 to 115 and memorize again. I'm going to go up 10 to 125 and memorize again. I'm going to go up 10 one more time to 135 and memorize again. Now, if you can see my screen here, I know it's very small. Maybe I can bring the larger screen up. This is 105. Now I'm at 115. Now I'm at 125. And then finally, I'm at 135. And you can hear the increase. Here's 105, 115, 125, and 135. And when I go back, I'm back to 105. Now let's go take a look at the Lowrys and see how it's done there. Okay, so here we are on a Lowry fanfare. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go find my polkas, which are under the traditional option. This one actually already comes up at 105 beats per minute, and it gave me an accordion, so I didn't have to do much else there unless I obviously wanted to change things. And I'm going to, again, set up these numbers. Now on the Easy series, so I guess this is the EY series, so a fanfare, a journey, an inspire, a rialto, anything larger than that, you're going to hit memorize. It's asking you, what do you want to memorize this to? Meaning one of these numbers is what I want to memorize it to, but these numbers have additional options on them. That is not an option on the Yamaha. And so I have to make a distinction as to, do I want to use something that they put on these numbers, or do I want to use my own thing? I want to use my own thing, which means I need to put it not on just simply button number 1, but on A1. So A1. Remember all those check marks on the Yamaha that I just left checked? Well, here, this is the same general principle in that it's asking me, do you want me to remember the style, which includes the tempo and everything else? I do. It's saying no right now, so we need to change that. The other side is transpose. Do I want to remember the tempo, or rather the key? I'm not using any changing key this week, but I always err on the side of doing that. So right now they both say no, and there are 3 ways that you can get it to say yes or with on some instruments. You hit both scroll buttons. They can both say with. You can hit a white key and a black key to get them both to change to with. Either level. I didn't play the bottom because I don't want the beat to start. Or you can play a long pedal and a short pedal, and they both say with. Once that's done, you turn your memorize off, and you'll see it will go from memorizing to memorized. I want to go up 10. What do? Same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Memorized to A number 2. With the style, with the transpose, memorize off. 10 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm going to be at 125. Memorize A number 3. I'm up 10 more. Final time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Memorize A number 4. With the style, with the transpose. Memorize off. Now I need to go and use them. Do I just go to number 1? And coincidentally, I didn't need to start with 1. I could have started with 2 or 5 or wherever. I just happen to always like to start at the beginning. If I just hit number 1, my sounds that I just went through all of the process of saving are not going to be there because I didn't only save it to 1, I saved it to A1. And there I can see 105 with my March polka. Number 2, 115. Number 3, 125. Number 4, 135. It's as simple as that. Here's my 105, 115, 125, and 135. Now I'm back to 105. You even have the ability, which we will talk about specifically in lessons down the road, I don't want to run out of our time today in the review, to show you how you can actually set the instrument up to hit those numbers on their own so that you don't have to hit them at all. The only thing better than hitting one button is no buttons. And that's one of the ways that you can do that. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about how this song could be played and would be played in more of a traditional manner. Now, how about our more traditionally printed rendition? Everything that we just went over only applies to the other one, which is not a bad thing because, as I said, most people only played the other one. It wasn't that many people got to the second rendition that gave the distinction between the notes in the left hand being played as bass notes or chords. But right off the bat, one of the things that's difficult about that, and not only that, just playing traditionally in general, whether you're using the bass pedal for the bass tones on an organ or you're playing low notes on a piano, it's that the left hand and the right hand are oftentimes moving at completely different rates of speed. And right off the bat, you notice that with this song. On line 1, the right hand is playing the same 4 notes, giving them each one beat at a time, the same note 4 times rather. The left hand is playing every other beat, but it's playing a different note. So whereas the right hand goes like this, same note, then the same note again, then same note down one more time. The left hand is going like this. Now it's either holding it or it's going this. But it's not playing at the same rate. That's playing much slower than the right. So if the right hand starts like this, left hand is here. And look at my first actual chord in that rendition. It's a C. Remember we spoke about the key of C? Well, there it is. This is a very common occurrence when you're talking about playing in a traditional manner. I often use the example of the song Heart and Soul to illustrate this, where the right hand goes. Okay? The left hand, on the other hand, does this. So that hand's doing this while the other hand's doing this, and it sounds really nice, but it's not easy. Very, very tricky to do. Okay? Now that first thing may sound easy to somebody that's never played before. They hear you go. But have them sit down and try it. That's really difficult. And this is not an unfounded thing. This is something that happens, and it has happened for a long time. Piano students run into this daily. It doesn't mean it's easy, but they run into it a lot. And it goes back to classical songs. A great example of a classical song where that has a little bit of this is the song Humoresque, where it goes. Now, I'm not evening all of those notes out. If I was, it would sound like this. So I'm putting stress on every other note. Now, how about the left hand? Well, the left hand is even. Now, if the right hand did what the left hand did evenly, it'd be a lot easier to play the song because you'd go like this. Note for note. But the right hand does this. The left hand does this. And you end up with this. That's not an easy thing to do, but that is something that you constantly run into when you're playing in a traditional manner. So I say all of that to say that there are a variety of things that you can get out of the other copy that you will not get out of this one, but vice versa. Okay? So if you only practice one, you got a lot out of that song. I don't want you to feel like both renditions are necessary in order for you to feel like you accomplished something during that week. They both have their little portions, which are very, very beneficial. Take them, though, as 2 separate songs. And no matter which one you practice, you're going to get some value out of that piece. When we come back, we're going to introduce our new song.